Good evening. In the absence of the supervisor, the clerk will open tonight's meeting, which is Tuesday, June 16th, 2015. Can everyone please stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Supervisor Limata is absent and excused. Trustee Durant.
Here.
Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Pompo.
Here.
Trustee Trescott.
Here. Treasurer
Johnson.
Here.
And Clerk Rattari is here. Staff present is Manager Gerard, Superintendent Kirk Page, John Marks from the ZBA, Ellen Sargent from the Planning Commission, and I think that's it. At this point in the meeting, we have to, before we move on, we will pick a chair.
I'd like to nominate Ernie.
See all my friends.
There was a motion, by Trustee Trescott and a second by Trustee Pompo to choose Treasurer Johnson, the chair of the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I abstain.
Motion carries. The meeting is now chaired by the treasurer.
Okay, the next item is the consent agenda, and the consent agenda is as follows: the prior meeting minutes of June 2nd, sheriff's report for May, the road committee minutes of May 4th, the water production report of May, the Peter White Public Library minutes from March 4th, and accounts payable checks in the amount of $170,994.65. Is there any item in the consent agenda that would want to be removed for further discussion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Support.
A motion and support to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the next item up is approval of the actual agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve and support. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda will be approved as presented. Public comment. Now's the time for the public to please go up and that. State your name and address and that.
Good evening. My name is Tom Baldini. I live at 815 Pine Street in the city of Marquette. I'm here this evening as chair of the 4th of July Fireworks Committee. And I wanted to come to thank you personally for your continued support for the fireworks and to just give you a little update. As you know, we're planning to do the fireworks on the 4th of July, and if that's raining, we'll do them on the 5th. And a couple of other things that are happening. The Rotary, two of the Rotary clubs in our area have decided to make a 5-year commitment to fundraise for the fireworks. They are selling 50/50 tickets, which I happen to bring some, but the tickets, and what they are hoping to do, this year we're starting a little late, but we got 6,000 tickets we're planning to sell. And the winning number will be posted on the last float of the parade on the 4th of July. The under 40, the 40 below group is putting together a float. The Rotary people will draw a ticket that morning, I believe, and then they'll post it on the float. And it could be rather substantial. And we're hoping that next year it'll even be more because we'll start the ticket sales much earlier. The Rotary Club would like us to pay for the fireworks and then to put some aside to start an endowment, which we are going to do. We have the money to pay for this year's fireworks. As you know, last year we had a fire in the fireworks. Luckily, no one was injured. And as you know, you read and you see these things. So this year, they have made a commitment to do this for 5 years, and we're quite excited by that. Secondly, after the 4th of July this year, we are putting together, we're going to hold a meeting and invite, obviously, the 3 governmental units, the 2 townships in the city, and the fraternal groups, and we're going to try and put together an umbrella group to really take on the entire activities of the 4th of July for the parade, maybe the Exchange Club they'll decide, and the 4th of July activities itself. We're finding that a lot of people, we have no idea. Somebody asked me how many people watch the fireworks. I said, we don't know. We know that it's in the thousands and thousands because they line the highway up to Munising. People just go everywhere in the area. As you know, the 2 townships in the city really make up 48% of the population of the county, but we know that just thousands of people come in. The other thing we're doing this year is we're going to choreograph the fireworks to music. And you'll be able to pick that up on the radio. Those who are down in the park, they'll be able to listen, but they'll also be able to pick it up on the radio. We're going to try that, and let's hope. But we've seen it elsewhere. And so now the issue is what kind of music, and I'm staying out of that, okay? Let somebody else decide that one. So we're enthusiastic. We've had good support, and we want to be here this evening to thank you for your continued support, financial support to put this on. And as you know, I've seen all of you at other activities, and you raise money also. And people now cross the street when they see me coming, but we put somebody else on the other side of the street also. But thank you very much, and I'm here to present to you, and Mr. Johnson, let me present this to you as the chair this evening, a certificate just saying thank you for your continued support, because, as I've always said, $1 here and $1 there before long, it adds up, and obviously yours is more than $1. But that's how we put this on, and we really call it the greatest Fourth in the North, and there are plans to do other things as time goes on, and it brings a lot of people here. So thank you for your continued support, and thank you for what you also do as a governmental unit and a body. So let me present this to you, Mr. Johnson, and thank you for the support of the township.
Thank you. On behalf of the township, thank you.
Thank you, okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Hope to see you all on the 4th.
As long as it isn't raining or cold.
Yes, let's hope we have weather like last year, but the backup is the 5th, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Ellen Sargent, 685 Erie, and Planning Commission Chair, and I'm here tonight because you have the first reading of the lighting ordinance. So I'm here if you have any questions or you had any concerns. I know you had it in your packet. No, right there.
Anyone else on public comment?
Brian Savalley with UP Engineers and Architects. Couple of things. One, I'm here for item A of unfinished business and item A of new business. If it makes sense, if you want to move the item A under unfinished to the end of unfinished business, we could just lead right into that for a topic and just keep those together if you'd like. The other thing I'd like to comment on, I understand you are looking at a new stormwater management plan for the township. UP Engineers and Architects is also the engineer for the Drain Commissioner. When we're not the engineer on a township project, the Drain Commissioner does go elsewhere with some things, and I may comment on that topic as well, just to give you some insight on what we do for the township already and clear up any redundancies and things like that. I know a lot of developers have concerns about additional fees for reviews that they may already be paying for. So just curious, I may or may not comment on that topic. Thank you.
Any other individuals would like to speak on public comment? If not, we will close public comment and board member comment. Trustee?
Sorry. We did not have a library meeting tonight. That'll actually be tomorrow because they're going to discuss their budget. Their budget year starts in October, I believe, because they have a 15-month year now with the city. So I'm going to try to get to that tomorrow night. I believe they've blocked out 3 hours, so we'll see how adventurous I am. And I'm not going to say too much about the planning in case you have questions for Chair Ellen, but we did look at, make sure I got the right one here. June, there we go. I brought the backup for the lighting ordinance, too. We looked at Pedro de Vero's site plan for a new fitness center coming in up in the America Mall, I think, back in that, behind that, in that area. And the rest of the meeting, it was a pretty quick meeting, actually. It was just about an hour or so. Lots of discussion about the lighting ordinance and our zoning that I had talked to you before about resource production. And maintenance enforcement, we've had lots of questions about old cars and fences and long grass and stuff. So we are working on that. The hardest part, of course, is the enforcement part of it. It isn't just writing the ordinance. It's making sure we can do something about it, and then it has teeth. And we'll be starting our CIP. We've looked at the forms and passed them to you, and they'll be going out to department heads if they haven't already. So that'll be on our, posted pretty quickly. And that's about it. We talked a little bit about the road millage, but the lighting ordinance was the biggest thing that we're kind of excited about. So if you have questions later, let us know. That's all I have.
Diane?
Nothing?
Pete?
Excuse me. I'd like to wish everyone happy Father's Day, all the fathers in the area. And also to bring up fireworks, just have a little respect for your neighbors. It's coming 4th of July and not shoot them off at 3, 4 in the morning, as we did last year. Also, this coming Saturday at the Lions Field Hockey Rink, we're going to have a 3-on-3 hockey, street hockey tournament that was postponed from before because of the weather. It warmed up and we lost the ice, so now we're going to have it this coming Saturday. It's going to start from 8 to 4, and it'll be at the Lions Field out there, so I'd like to have everyone stop in and enjoy it. Thank you.
Dan? No. Randy?
The only thing I have is the last day to register to vote for the August election is Monday, July 6th. So make sure if anyone wants to vote in that, get in here by 4 o'clock that day.
I have a couple items. Township resident stopped me today as I was driving out of my driveway, and he owns a lot here in Trowbridge. And he says, I seem to be getting a lot of leaves and a lot of brush and concrete blocks and everything else in my empty lot over there. So all I could say is, okay, thank you, I'll go take a look, and it was there and that too. So I have to say it's probably starting now because they don't want to drive anywhere. So they're going to find out where there's an empty lot, they're going to start dumping stuff and that. So what we can do about it is really not much because we're doing the best we can trying to get a place to go, and people just don't want to drive and that. So he was very upset about it, but there wasn't much you could do because he couldn't identify who it was and that. So go from there. So I figured I better bring it up, let you know it's starting and that. And I went to the Township Business Association today, and there was a number of items on there. The brochure, they're working on that, and the brochure will be on the businesses and some history of the township and that will be available for all new businesses and anyone we want to give it to, or they want to give it to at that point in time. The other thing is they're working on the different signs, and I don't have more than one copy, and I'll pass them, but they did some very, very nice work on just on one of them, and they're working on all of them and that. So each one of them is going to be worked on, and they're working on one of them on, which one is it on? County Road 492, and they're going to redo a couple of them, and the one on Grove Street, which is the old type one. We're trying to see what it's going to cost to get a new one that represents like all of them in that. So they're moving forward, and I've seen a couple, 2 places, they really did an excellent job in that. So the township does allocate dollars for it, and they've been utilizing it for flowers and that. So it really looks nice. I'll pass them so you'll take a look at that. So that's all I have. So with that, I'll close board member public comment. And the next item is on privilege comment, the audit presentation by Gambridge and Company, the video conference. And I'll turn it over to our clerk.
Okay, we're going to be a little innovative tonight. Instead of having the gentlemen travel here, we're going to try to do this by video conference. So I tested it out today. Everything was good. So the gentleman from Gabridge is Joe Verlin. He's going to go through the audit with us. And are you there, Joe?
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll start by saying that it was very much a privilege to work with the township staff. Everybody continued to be very professional. We received most of the information ahead of time, and the information that we received traces back to the financial statements that we're able to support all the revenues and expenditures, as well as the assets and liabilities of the township. And the staff does a remarkably good job. We have just over 130 municipal clients throughout the state of Michigan. And I'll say that the township of Marquette does as good a job as anyone else. So Lois and the staff really do phenomenal work. Having said all that, really the most important sentence in this entire audit report can be found on page 2. It's the opinion that we provide. And in the opinion paragraph, and we make the statement that in our financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respect the financial position of the government elected such activities representing component unit Charter Township of Marquette as of December 31st, 2014. That's referred to as an unmodified opinion, and it's the highest level of opinion that we can render on the financial. And again, it just echoes the fact that staff is doing their job, they're doing things the way they should. It should always be the township's goal to get that unmodified opinion, but it does mean something to achieve it. The next section of the audit report that I typically take readers through is management, discussion, and analysis. I point this out to the readers because it's one section where you can get some historical context as to what the numbers mean, because you can see 2-year comparative financials. It also points out some financial highlights and provides narratives as to what the numbers mean and what led to the increases in revenues and expenses and things of that nature. So let's look through the audit report. Next page I wanted to look at page 4. And we've got several bullet points and some of the key highlights for the year. The first bullet point shows that net position for the town increased by $1,230,142 for the year. This is on the same basis of accounts that corporations would use. In other words, the accrual basis of accounts. It means it's a long-term outlook. I would think of an increase in net position as being similar to net income. So it's a positive sign to see an increase in net position. Doesn't mean that that's necessarily how much cash or resources became available to the township, but certainly an important trend to see heading in the direction. As you read through the rest of that point, you see that the business sector and the governmental activities both have about $120,000 of the 1.2 million. So very consistent between business type, which are the water and sewer fund, and governmental activities, which would be the general fund and fire fund, things of that, the governmental fund. The next bullet point that I wanted to hit on focus more on the general fund, which is the most important fund of any municipality. And you can see that total fund balance was $391,400 for the general fund. That's an increase of roughly $191,781 for the year, which again is very good sign. And the last bullet point I want to hit on is the last is unassigned fund balance for the general fund is $381,976, or approximately 17% of the total general fund expenditures. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends about 17%. So the township is right on with what the GFOA recommends to have in reserve in the unassigned fund balance for the general fund. Right on target, good financial condition for the township as of December 31st, 2014. So all the financial highlights certainly show healthy financial condition and a healthy healthy financial direction for the township. Next, we'll go to page 8. This is a comparative statement of net position. If we were in the corporate world again, it would be described as a balance sheet. So it's all the assets and liabilities for the town compared to 2013 to get some historical context, provide some general information in terms of how things are trending. Now, a couple that I think are worth pointing out. First, cash equivalents are fairly stable. If the very top row to the very far right, from all the governmental funds, you can see December 31st, 2013, there was $3,870,340, and that compares to $3,126,863 as of December 31st, 2014. So a slight decrease in cash, but if you look about or not goes down, the capital assets increased as well. December 31st, 2013, the capital assets, which include building, infrastructure, that nature, more focused, increased from $18,262,807 as of December 31st, 2013, to $20,008,819 as of December 31st, 2014. So cash decreased, but it's primarily as a result of the township invest in its infrastructure, and we can incorporate a similar increase in long-term assets. Next thing that I wanted to point out is it's the second row from the bottom. When we look at the elements of net position, unrestricted net position represents its liquid or cash to it. How much does the township have available to cover immediate financing needs, whether it be utilities, wages, capital outlays, things of that nature? You can see that there was actually a slight increase. So December 31st, 2013, there was $2,165,020 of unrestricted net position, and it increased slightly to $2,888,781 as of December 31st, 2014. So fairly stable in terms of the amount of liquid assets that the township has. Next, on page 10, we can see comparative revenue and expenses for the township. And again, this is built on the accrual basis of accounting. And a couple areas that I wanted to point out. First, in business type activities, you can see an increase in charges for services. This is the fourth column over the very first row, the very top row. December 31st, 2013, had $2,966,480 of charges for services. That is $2,860,599 for 2014. Two significant reasons for that. First one being that there were 32 new sewer connections added during 2014. So that's going to be repeat charges for services going into the future, which is certainly healthy. The other significant reason for that increase is the fact that the state of Michigan provided a dollar reimbursement for freeze-up because of the harsh winter. So that had a positive impact on charges for services during 2014 as well. If you look two more rows down at capital grants in governmental activities, the very first column, there was $100,000 of capital grants received, primarily for the Lions rink. So a one-time capital grant to assist with that building. And if you look about halfway down, you can see total revenue increase. The far right column, 2015, was $5,267,023. Total revenues increased to $5,546,206 for 2014. So a healthy increase for the year in total revenues. If we look down at the expense section, about 8 rows down, the expenses in the business type activities, which is the third column over, wastewater fund had an increase to $845,335 of operating expenses. And again, that has primarily to do with harsh winter. There was roughly $113,000 of cost directly related to the harsh. So there were also some one-time expenses related to that one-time inflow of cash from the state of Michigan. Altogether, if you look 2 rows up from the bottom, on the very far right column, total government across all funds, there's basically a $1,120,000 net increase in positions, in that position for the, which is very comparable with the same increase in 2014 of $1,236,142. Not only did the township have a good operating performance in 2014, it's a continuation of a trend. So prudent financial management at the township. Next, I wanted to go to page 17. Here we get into the fund financial statements. This is on the more traditional modified accrual basis of accounting. And you can see the general fund, the fire fund, which are both major funds for the township, and all the other governmental funds get aggregated into one column, the third column over, and then total governmental funds on the far right. General fund had, again, as we mentioned, the financial highlights, unassigned fund balance of $381,976, which is approximately 17% of the annualized expenditures. If you go one column over to the fire fund, you can see positive fund balances in the fire fund. And then when you look at the other governmental funds, you can also see that they too have positive fund balances. This, again, is on a modified accrual, which is, I would think of it as almost being cash basis type of accounting. How much is available now to cover the operating expenditures of the township, and all of the funds have positive fund balances, which when you look at communities throughout the state of Michigan, that's not the case. Very commonly, there are deficit balances in funds. That's not the case here at the township. Very healthy reserves, not only in the general fund, but across all of the funds. Next page that I wanted to take a look at, we're going to stay still in the governmental funds and the modified basis of accounting. You can see the total revenues across the funds, as well as the total expenditures across the funds. And again, as we mentioned earlier, you can see that the general funds, the third row up from the bottom on the far left column, had an increase in fund balance for the year of $191,781. And then when we look in the far right column, total governmental funds, there was an increase in the year of $54,674. So when we look at all the funds as a whole, the township is able to show an increase in fund balances. Again, I would think of this as being more of a cash basis. How much cash came in during the year? How much cash went out during the year? Not quite that simple, but it gives a pretty good idea of what came in versus what went out during the course of the year. And there was an increase of the $54,674, which again is a positive sign. Now I'm going to flip all the way to page 50, which gets us into the required supplemental information. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board has issued statement number 68, and up to this point, all municipalities who have defined benefit pension plans have been able to simply include the unfunded portion of their defined benefit pension obligation in the required supplemental section of their audit report. That is going to change on December 31st, 2015. The township is going to need to pick up this liability, and to give an idea of what the liability could be, the actuaries as of December 31st, 2014 measured it at $627,468, and you can see that to the middle column, third row down from the bottom, December 31st, 2014 valuation date. Again, $627,468. It's not, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to that calculation, but it gives a ballpark idea of what that liability could be. Instead of simply being included in the required supplementary information, that's going to move over to the statement of net position and be reported as a liability on the upcoming audit report. So there's no impact in terms of cash flow. It's not going to change. Right now, the township has 24 years to pay in the $627,000. That's not going to change. The township's not going to be required to pay that any earlier. But at the same time, because it's an unconditional obligation, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board felt that that liability really belongs on the statement of net position. There'll be a prior period adjustment on next year's audit report to get that onto the books. So just one thing to keep in mind, given the township's healthy financial condition, it's not going to create a deficit net position on the statement of net position, but it is going to be a significant liability that is going to appear on next year's audit report. The last thing that I wanted to hit on is towards the very end of the audit report. We, as auditors, don't render an opinion on internal control, but we are required to assess internal control as part of our audit. So when we are evaluating assets and liabilities, we have to gain an understanding of how the township measures those assets and liabilities and how they get measured throughout the course of the year. And in doing so, we gain an understanding of controls, the related controls. And if we see a control that we feel in our judgment is poorly designed, or if we see a control that is adequately designed but not operating how it should be, we are required to bring that to the attention of management and to the board. This report is the report on internal control. It's not an opinion on internal control, but it does state that we found no material weaknesses. There are no findings that we feel need to be brought to the attention of the board or to management. And you can see that it's the second to last sentence on the last paragraph of this page. The page numbering starts over because it's a side letter. But again, given these limitations, I'll read the sentence. During our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be material weaknesses. I would estimate that roughly 3/4 of our townships do have some level of findings that we need to report. But again, because the staff has such good controls in place, there's a lot of checks and balances, everybody's doing their job. We did not find anything that we felt needed to be brought to the attention of management or to the board. So again, very much representative of the professionalism that goes into the financial reporting of the township. Those are the financial highlights that I wanted to cover, as well as the report that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Okay, Joe, since I'm the only one in front of the computer, any of the board members that have any questions, I can relay them to Joe here. And then if not, I can provide you with Joe's email, and you could get those answered in writing if you would like. Any questions from the board? Any down here, Pete?
No, I looked through it and I made different remarks, but, not being an accountant, what I do is read the first part, and then I go right back to the last page and make sure it's, what they're saying about it. And I like what I hear. We get, with the balance sheets and that, we get them every month so we can watch what's going on. And I'm happy to say that, hear what he had to say, that we are in good shape and we are doing, the right things at the right time, so.
Okay, so Trustee LaRue said he likes what he hears from you guys.
You okay?
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think Lynn had some, but she had to step out for a minute on that.
Okay.
The only question I have is that unfunded liability that we're changing at the end of the year, what effect and how that's gonna affect the township in that.
Question on the unfunded liability, Joe.
Sure.
How's that going to affect the township into the future?
So if you look at the statement of position, which is on page 15,
It's up here.
there's going to be a liability that's going to pop up in the non-current liability. So in this general section, in this general section here, non-current liabilities, you're going to see a new liability pop up showing the unfunded portion of the pension obligation. It could be roughly 606 to 700,000. It really depends on how the actuaries crunch their numbers. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces to it, but there's going to be $600,000 to $700,000 of additional liability showing up. But as you can see, the township has about $15 million of total net positions and roughly $2 million, almost $2.9 million of unrestricted net positions. So it's going to obviously have a significant impact. It's going to be an additional liability that's going to pop up on the statement of net positions, but the township is going to have the financial condition in order to be able to absorb that type of an impact. Another thing to take into consideration is many municipalities in the state of Michigan aren't going to be able to absorb it. They're going to have this new liability showing up on their statement of net position, and it's going to create a deficit balance. The state of Michigan, or the Treasury, understands that, and they, even if it did create a deficit position on the statement of net position, we would simply put no, disclose that, and it wouldn't require a deficit elimination plan, but that's really not going to be applicable with Marquette because of the strong shape that its balance sheet is in, or the statement of net position is in as of December 31st, 2014.
Okay, Lynn, did you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Joe. This is Lynn Durant. I'm one of the trustees.
Actually, Lynn,
Or-
just
He can't hear me?
he can, if you want to come sit here for a second, he
Okay.
could hear you fine from this position. Okay, Joe, Trustee Durant would like to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Sorry, I'm kind of in a coughing mode tonight, so if I have to break out, I'll let you know. I talked to Manager Gerard this afternoon and got a lot of my questions answered. But the first one is on page 15. It also shows up on page 8, I think. It's
Okay.
internal balances.
Sure.
And if I understand this correctly, I do have my own business, so I kind of have an understanding of balance sheets and how this works, but the governmental activities falls with legislative, elections, public safety, recreation, community, culture, and G&A, and the business type activities would be the anything where we charge for the services, like in the water department. So my question on the internal balances is why would we, it looks like we're transferring money, or is it just a representation for the purposes of the report, going from the enterprise funds to the general fund, which would be governmental?
Yes, what that represents is a $174,195 balance due from the solid waste fund to the general fund. And it's, to have interfund balances, I guess I would think of it as having two companies, and one company temporarily loans to another company based on cash flow needs or whatever the case might be. But this is it's very common in municipal accounting to have interfund balances, and that's simply showing the fact that business type activities are currently borrowing from governmental activities. so to speak, at least on a short-term basis. And you can see that governmental activities and business type activities, when you add those two together, they eliminate each other when we go into the total column. But that's what that number is getting at.
Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. And at the bottom, excuse me, that same page, you were talking about 2.8 million being liquid. It's not really liquid because it contains the enterprise funds. Wouldn't that be true?
Yes. So it depends on what the purpose of the fund is. So, for example, of the there's roughly 2.2 million available in the enterprise funds. So let me get into the enterprise fund statements. Let's start on page 21. So you can see the wastewater fund has $1,456,750 of unrestricted net position. So in other words, that wastewater fund can use those dollars for wastewater purposes, whether it be wages or utilities. It's not restricted for capital outlays or repair and maintenance or debt service, anything along those lines. There's a level of freedom in how the township expends those funds. One thing to keep in mind, the amount that really is truly unassigned and has diminished strings attached to it is in the general fund. So in terms of the financial flexibility of any municipality, I would think unassigned fund balance of the general fund is a better measure of immediate flexibility. So if the board wanted to invest or take on a project, really the unassigned fund balance in the general fund is a better measure of total available or liquid assets for expenditure, which is $381,000 as of December 31st, 2014.
Right, I kind of pointed that out for the public purposes too, so that they don't think we have millions of dollars just sitting around that we're not doing anything with. Even though it's unrestricted,
Sure.
it is somewhat restricted.
Sure, and I think it's important to understand that the township is at 17% of the unassigned fund balance of the general fund is 17%, which is right on target with what the Government Finance Officers Association recommends. So it's adequately funded. I wouldn't say there's an abundance of cash or a surplus of cash. It's township's right on target with where it should be.
Okay. I'm curious about page 29. Excuse me, receivables and payables, the last sentence in that first paragraph.
Okay.
It says any residual balances outstanding between the government activities and the business type activities, which is what I kind of just explained, are reported in the government-wide financial statements as internal balances. So that's
Yes.
kind of a contradiction then, or?
Well, when we look at the internal balances, this $174,195 is a receivable in governmental activities. It's a debit.
From
So
the
in
other
other words,
fund.
it expects to be repaid at some point in the short-term future. So there is a receivable there. And we look at the business type activities, there's a payable there. They equally offset each other to get to zero. So they do get eliminated in the government-wide statement.
But they really aren't
That's really
residual
what-
balances.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, they're not really residual balances. It's a specific, as you described, a specific loan that transpired from one fund to the other. It's not like it's
Correct.
extra money.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, one more thing.
Okay.
Page 34, and Treasurer Johnson can correct me if I'm not understanding this right, but in the middle of custodial risk, credit risk and deposits, it says, due to the dollar amounts of cash deposits and the limits of FDIC insurance, the township believes it's impractical to insure all bank deposits. I don't know that we ever said that or did that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how it's written. As far as I know, one of the things that Treasurer Johnson did when he got into his position was to make sure he diversified enough so that all of our funds were FDIC insured. So
Right.
I just like clarification on that.
Sure. The FDIC rules changed, and I would recommend taking a look at the FDIC website because they do change frequently. As of December 31st, 2014, the FDIC will cover $250,000 of savings in each financial institution and another $250,000 of checking in each financial institution. So up to $500,000 can be insured at each given financial institution. Typically what happens when a municipality has operating costs, high cash flow needs, it's difficult to have less than $500,000 in the checking and savings accounts because there's an immediate need to cover payables of that nature. For that reason, it becomes difficult to achieve 100% FDIC coverage. And really, the best practice in that case is just to have an understanding of the creditworthiness of the lending institutions and banking institutions that the township works with. So to have a level of uninsured cash is very common, especially when there's almost $5 million of cash that the township has at its disposal. And given the fact that only $500,000 can be covered at a given institution, it would be difficult to achieve 100% FDIC coverage of those funds.
Pretty much, so, one comment too, you
Turn your mic on there.
may not be aware of, I don't know, on one of our financial institutions, we have collateral insurance up to $700,000 with that financial institution that we utilize for that reason, to have additional dollars there without having to invest it in a $250,000 someplace in that. So we have operating funds sitting there, and the actual financial institution pays for the insurance on that additional fund in that. The biggest problem I have as a treasurer, I'm sure any municipality, is when the tax money comes in, it comes in lump sums, and trying to move it through fast enough to get it insured, everything, sometimes it becomes a chore to keep it moving and also have enough dollars available for daily and weekly operations in that. But by having that one financial institution with collateral insurance, we've been able to hopefully meet all the needs and protect all the money for the township in that.
And that is a good point. As of year end, the township typically has over $1 million sitting in its tax account, and that number can fluctuate very quickly. Again, echoing Treasurer Johnson's point.
So maybe the better way to say that sentence would be just to say it's impractical to insure 100% of bank deposits, so that it gives a little more flexibility in, because you're saying all, like I got the impression that we had already decided that we weren't going to worry about covering the bank deposits, and maybe that's just the way I read it. But I understood what you were saying, it just didn't seem like it was quite the right sentence to say that we believe it's impractical to insure our money. I don't know if you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Some of these come from AIC templates in terms of how the verbiage needs to be, but that certainly is something that we can take a look at tailoring to make sure that the appropriate message is conveyed when we get to that next year.
Especially if we have financial people looking at these, if we're going to do any bonding or something, and they happen to look at it and think, wow, well, apparently they don't care whether they have all their money insured, That's all I was concerned about.
Sure.
And that's all I had, Joe. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I guess if the board doesn't have any other questions, we'll dismiss Joe. And he's actually in Grand Rapids, so you're in Grand Rapids, right, Joe?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we'll dismiss you for a lovely evening. Hopefully the weather's good down there like it is here today. So.
Yep, beautiful day.
Okay, Thanks, Joe, and I will give the board members your email, so if they have any follow-up to the audit, they can email you, okay?
I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Joe, and it worked pretty good. I kind of, it was a little choppy at the beginning, but I muted myself, and it was a lot better when I did that. So thank you very much, and we will move on, I guess. I'll turn it back over to Treasurer Johnson.
Thank you. Now we'll move
Okay.
on.
Thank you, Graham.
Are we off?
We are off.
Okay, now we move forward. The one item which I have always a lot concerned with is unfunded liability, and I think during our budget sessions, we're going to have to look at that and see how the long-term effect on it. Manager Gerard.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of information on that. It really, all that GASB 68 requires is that unfunded liability now be reflected on the balance sheet. It never required that before. There is not anything new. We've had that unfunded liability forever. We are covering that long-term basically by our contributions to the retirement system. We're at 75% funded right now. The average for these funds is about 54%. We're well above where the average communities are. Oh, I thought I turned it on, it must not have gone on. So we're in good shape in that regard, but it will reflect, as he said, as of December 31st of this year, it will have that $657,000 future liability will have to be reflected as a current liability. So it really isn't going to change our position at all, it's just going to look like it does.
I just don't like unfunded liability pushing into the future in that, because the new boards come on and they look at it and they got an unfunded liability they have to address in that too, so.
Right, yeah, and realistically, Trustee Durant and I talked about this afternoon. What that's presuming is that everybody who's currently employed will go to retirement, and that may not necessarily be the case. We have a 10-year vesting. We have at least 3 of our staff that have not met that 10-year vesting. Obviously, we have one sitting in the audience that has multiple times and could retire really at any point in time, but then would be replaced with a less senior position. So the assumption for that $600,000 is that everybody that's currently employed will stay with us fully employed until they retire and will draw a full retirement. And that may not necessarily be the case. So that's the maximum amount that we would be facing as a future liability.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on now, into unfinished business. Now, the question I have what's before me is, do we want to combine 9A and 10A? And at this point in time, so we can have the engineers one right into the other. Clerk.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to move 10A to 9A1. So I'll combine them to both together, and I'll give UPEA a chance to address both of them.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we got now, under unfinished business, we have 9A and we have 9A1, which is the old 10A. So first thing is the local road rehabilitation project update. UPEA recommendations. You're on, Brian.
All right, well, thank you for moving me up. I gave you the option to move me back, but I appreciate that, and it shouldn't take too long, hopefully. The last item we had to do for this year was to get bids on the seal coating portion of the road work. Again, when you look at the overall amount of the roads we're doing in the neighborhood of about 70% of them this year. We had estimated $300,000 for this particular contract. We only did receive one bid, and I don't have that information in front of me, and you guys should have that in your packet, but it did come in, I believe, $284,000 or $285,000, so it was under our budget. At the last meeting, we had told you we had looked at the entire package and looked like we would need to bond about $3.2 million this year. That is pretty much falling right in line. We did get some information back from the bonding attorneys here, I think, this afternoon. And the $3.2 million bond for this year would cover both contracts, our engineering fees, and based on our initial estimate of the revenue being generated, I think we were looking at about $2 million left for the remainder of the project. I don't want to quote exactly what's left, but it appears that there's actually more revenue being generated. Maybe $500,000, and it could be higher than that right now, based on, your manager can update that. But what that looks like it'll actually do now is, in moving forward and looking at the utility portions, we may be able to cover a major majority now of the road costs with the actual road millage, rather than using a water fund to pay for part of the pavement, which we thought may have been required. And we have actually started looking at this. The cost of the utility project, whether we do an RD or a revolving water fund, may only be for the utility itself. And that's what we're trying to get our heads wrapped around right now, so we're working towards that. So based on everything we've seen so far, we recommend that you award the milling, or the seal coating portion tonight, and we will look at moving forward with the bonding. We've been in touch with the county. We've got several people working on that, and right now we're looking at July 7th. Both boards have meetings on that date. If we can get some action at or near that time, we can start construction on both of these projects in the month of August, based on what we've heard. So things look really good in terms of what we've seen there. Just a little bit more update. You had also approved the $150,000 contingency. That is included in that $3.2 million. And we have identified about half of that right now, that we are going to be moving from seal coat to some sort of resurfacing. We think there's a little bit more that needs better repair, and you have the money to do that, and now's the time to do that, and that's why we asked that you allow that. So, we'll again, be coming to the public. I believe July 7th, there's a road committee meeting that we will be at. We'll have completely updated maps and everything at that time, and we'll be ready to move forward with this year's construction work. And if Randy wants to add anything, he can. If you have any questions, feel free, and I will try to address them.
Manager Gerard.
Excuse me, just a couple of comments. The exact amount that is in your packet, basically, that Brian was speaking to on the bid is $286,816.23. That was the bid for combined chip seal and crack seal for the remainder of the roads that would not be resurfaced construction, basically. We have moved forward. We've had telephone conference with the bond counsel and with the bond attorney. The bond attorney and the bonding agent. As Brian mentioned, I did see late yesterday afternoon there was an exchange between the two of them with draft language for the bond sale. So they are working on that, getting that ready to go, and we are targeting beginning this project in August, as Brian said. Now, the additional revenue that Brian was referring to comes from our estimates. As we did with the budget and with everything else, we took an extremely conservative approach in terms of projecting what our revenue was going to be, taking a position that all of those businesses that could follow the, quote, dark stores theory would follow that. And that's what we predicated our revenue stream on, with a minor 3% growth rate over that 15 years. We will be having some new construction. They will be coming on the tax roll and those kinds of things. And actually, although we have been getting additional challenges, it has not been at the volume that we thought that it might be. Not saying that that won't pick up, but as of right now, a number of the businesses are taking a position or indicating to us that they're going to take a position similar to what Walmart took, coming to us and saying, we're not going to avail ourselves of the tax tribunal. Let's talk about what's reasonable. And we have negotiated a couple of those out so far that have been within our acceptable range. And when you do these appraisals, when our assessor goes out and does the assessments, there are parameters that they're using in terms of type of construction, type of materials, things such as that are going off of what was submitted. in their plans. And in some cases, that changes over the course of the design and the course of the building. We're going back now and looking at those, and those may modify what the assessments are, and that's what we're basing renegotiations on, looking back into those to see what was actually built as opposed to what was proposed. So that's where we're at the moment. As I say, we are still getting challenges. Just so you know how far this dark stores issue is moving, we have now been contacted by Clackamas County in Oregon, and they're going through it. So it's spreading across the country. They're using the Michigan model in other states to try and reduce taxes within their corporate boundaries. Lowe's, Target, the various corporations. And this particular one in Oregon is a Lowe's. So they're using what's happened in Michigan to establish what their comparable market is in other states. So it's going rampant across the country.
Is there any questions for anyone on Brian for the direction we're moving now? Clerk, Tari?
I'll make a motion that we approve the crack fill chip seal project to Farner asphalt sealers for the amount of $286,816.23, not to exceed.
Second.
We have a second to that. Any comments from board members? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passed, the motion is, and we have moving forward again with another portion of the road plan. Okay, that takes care of both 9A and 10A at this point in time.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
Question for Brian, is there anything that the board has to do before the July 7th meeting for bonding? I mean, if we need something to do that, we could have a special meeting before that time.
Yeah, I'm not aware. We are waiting on a schedule that I haven't seen yet. I was hoping to have that back today. I believe the only thing that we probably will need to do is just publish a notice, public notice 15 days prior to that. I'm not positive, but I believe we will. So as soon as we know that, we will notify Randy and we'll move forward with what we need to do there. The other action would be whether, we did talk about whether or not maybe we need to do a combined meeting, or I'm kind of thinking our staff could also have people at both meetings and maybe handle it that way. So it would depend on how that works out. But
Yeah, we will be pressed for time in terms of getting that notice out. It has to be in a specific format. It usually takes about 4 to 5 days to get that into the paper. Luckily, we have an extra week between this meeting and the next meeting, so we should be able to meet that 15 days. One of the things that we did discuss, as Brian mentioned, is trying to schedule a joint meeting between the Township Board and the County Board, and also possibly having the Road Commission do a special meeting that same night, since you meet on the same nights, the Township and the County do, and have it all be able to take in one place in terms of discussion and understanding of what's happening. I thought that might be a better way to do it. The one action that you do need to take tonight, though, is to award the bid to Farner.
I thought we just did that.
We did that, yeah.
Okay, as recommended?
Yeah.
Okay.
As recommended, yes.
Okay, thank you. But July 7th would be the target meeting we would be looking at. That would get us on track with getting all the paperwork done that was necessary to be done for the bonds to be issued and then to start the construction in August.
And just to clarify, the bond will be through the county. We did
Correct.
discuss a couple of different options, whether the township would. It just makes more sense, and there's a little bit of savings with the county doing that.
The rationale for that is the county has a bond rating that puts them at the bank rate, which means it's the lowest interest rate available.
Trustee LeBrew?
Brian, when you say the project will start in August, how long is it
Yeah,
going?
right now, it looks like the way, we could have a first payment ready on August 15th.
So the scope of the project is going to take, what is August, September?
Yeah, actually, the paving portion will take August, probably until late October. The chip seal that you awarded would probably only be about 3 to 4 weeks, and would be August into maybe late September.
Just worried about the weather, that's all.
Yeah, the paving contractors are too, but they feel confident that the August date is good, and it works really good with Payne and Dolan's schedule. So we've been in touch with them on a weekly basis.
The only question I have, Brian, is once we get set to go, is that we have a schedule of streets as we move forward in that too.
Yeah, what we're actually hoping to do as part of that meeting that we'll have on the 7th with the road committee is to start to outline that. And we will have a pre-construction meeting with Payne and Dolan probably sometime in late July or early August. And it'll give us a couple of weeks to actually prepare a map that will include anticipated target dates. Payne and Dolan will need to give us a paving schedule on what they're doing. There may be some modifications as we move forward, but we will try and pinpoint as close as we can prior to construction starting when those streets will be targeted.
I think the biggest concern I have, once we hit September, we start getting the schools back into session in that too.
Yeah, and
so.
they're aware of that too, and those are things that we'll make a point to. And in areas that are traffic concerns, we will try to get those accomplished before things like that happen, you know. And my guess is the last road we're gonna do is gonna be their road to their plant, you know, which is pretty substantial, so.
Any other questions? If not, then we'll move on to the next item, which is Stormwater Management Ordinance, second reading and adoption.
Oh, 9B.
Oh, the Lions Field recreational area. Who is going to speak tonight?
Well, actually, none of the members that were going to speak to it are here, and they did not submit anything for the packet, so I'm not sure that they're ready to move. I know there's still significant discussion with regard to the design and with regard to where the pathway is going.
So I was trying to suggest that we move that to the July one. Trustee LaRue.
As far as the Lions Field, we're working on right now is trying to get the stuff out of there. You know, we have some material there, some sand, gravel, and blacktop, some culverts we're going to get out of there. Randy said he's going to get that done. And then also get the grading and get it in there and have it graded, because we want to get trees in here this fall. So, and then we'll seed it after we get it.
Yeah, so those things are being done currently. What I was referring to was the actual design, the design plan in terms of where the parking is going to be, where the pathway is going to be. We are going forward with the construction aspects of it, as Trustee LaRue mentioned, removing the kiddie park materials that are there now, leveling that property. We believe there is enough material there in that hill that's going to be reduced down that we will not be buying sand basically to level. We should have enough in there to level off the areas we need to level, and then we need to get it seeded. And then the installation of the new kiddie park equipment. But what I was referring to is the actual design and the layout that has been before the board now twice and had some significant discussion. And I believe it was the Planning Commission taking any role on that? Not the planning, okay.
We made, the recommendation,
Okay.
but.
Trustee Pompel.
I have a couple of concerns. Every time I look at our monthly payouts, I notice that we pay $300 a month for storage of playground equipment that we've already purchased, and $150 a month for a porta potty that's sitting over there right now.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to me, from everything I can gather, is that the holdup on the installing the playground equipment is the fact that the old equipment is still there, and supposedly the Lions were going to remove that or whatever. I guess we're coming into July already, and I'd like to see the playground equipment installed in November. I mean, we're losing the whole summer here. I don't see any reason why we can't remove that playground equipment and set it somewhere so the Lions can later pick it up and get moving on the playground equipment. That would save us a $300 a month storage fee that we have them sitting. And the other thing would be is I know that the warming shed seems to be kind of on a hold mode, and I'm not sure where we are on that, but obviously it's been a year since we've got that grant. If we can't seem to get enough people to volunteer to finish it, I don't know why we don't go out looking to hire somebody to come in and finish that, to get the bathrooms up so we can save $150 a month there, as well as have it available for anyone using that area, including the playground, to get that moving on. It seems like we just keep putting it off, and I'd like to see that playground in as soon as possible.
We'll have to wait for the Recreation Committee and let them know our feelings in that, and tell them we need them to rack it up a little bit till we start moving on it and that too, so. Any other questions?
Do we need a motion to do that, or how does that get conveyed to them?
I think we convey it to them, that,
What Danny has mentioned, that is in the works right now,
okay.
as we speak.
Hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have positive response. Now we'll go into the stormwater management. Who will be the speaking on stormwater?
This is your second reading on the stormwater ordinance. It was before you at your last meeting for the first reading, which the board did do. I know the drain commissioner is present in the audience. I don't know if he has any comments that he wanted to make with regard to it, but we have had, just so the board knows, we have had some questions come from the builders in the area and the Builders Association concerned about whether or not we were moving forward with the utility type of an arrangement similar to what other communities have, and they have been assured that that is not our purpose, that it is not retroactive, that currently existing facilities would be, for any lack of a better term, grandfathered. This would not apply retroactively to them. It would be for new construction. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Page.
Well, last meeting, at the first reading, there was a presentation by consultants that basically presented an overview of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I won't rehash that, but I will just say that we have been looking at this since 2002. And the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here is to reinforce existing ordinances and rules and regulations, and all the people that are directly involved in stormwater management, the drain commissioner, the DEQ, the conservation district, the soil erosion and sedimentation control enforcement agency. You know, we were all involved in creating this ordinance. The intent was also to fill in some gaps that existed. There's been some questions about, and maybe Brian is one who brought it up, redundancy of fees, but basically everyone's paying right now for plan review and inspections, and that's not going to change in the future. Now, I have talked to the drain commissioner about that situation. He basically has authority in established drain districts and platted developments, and that's not going to change. And the requirements that we're proposing in the ordinance are not any different than what the existing requirements are in his ordinance. So it's just going to apply more, you know, in those gapped areas that are outside the, you know, platted districts or established drain districts. The plan review, right now, people are paying for plan review and inspection. That's part's not going to change. So really, it's no different than what's happening already, other than the township is stepping up and taking a more active role. It's been pretty passive for a number of years now. And when I was referencing the different agencies involved, I forgot to mention one of the most important ones, which was the township zoning ordinance and the township planner. So the ordinance already prohibits any discharge post-development, any increase in discharge than there was pre-development. So that's already basically a statement in the zoning ordinance. So it's going to be applied, you know, uniformly across the township. The fees are going to be the same. I will say one thing that is different is we're actually requiring a permit to be issued for construction of drain improvements on developments. That hasn't been the case in the past. There are certain submittals that have to be made to the drain commissioner, you know, in those districts. But basically, it goes back to the planning commission who basically approves the zoning compliance. Okay, so from the township perspective, once that occurs, okay, construction happens, time passes, and that's pretty much the end of it. But what we're trying to achieve here, and it's an established need from all these other agencies, is a commitment, basically, that's going to be a requirement to get a construction permit, to maintain those facilities now and into the future. So that's probably the main improvement that we're trying to make here. The bottom line is we're trying to make all the existing efforts just more effective. And we'll have basically more oversight and, you know, a long-term commitment on the part of the township to, I mean, what we're trying to achieve is essentially to prevent pollution of our waterways. And as was pointed out in the last meeting by a downstate consultant, I mean, this is very common in townships, you know, downstate, with way less to protect. You know, so, and that's one of the reasons that people, not necessarily businesses, but people move here, is, you know, the environment that we have. So, in a nutshell, that's the reason that we're proposing this ordinance.
Questions from board members? I think the only thing that came up that was not from before was a permit fee. And that permit they're going to have, is there a fee associated with that?
There is, and that's attachment.
Is that the attachment that you
Yep,
have here?
so there's only one fee, okay, the $500, that's not
That's it.
refundable.
Okay, you're referring that as the permit fee, the administrative fee.
Correct.
Okay,
But they also have to, basically, they have to pay for the review and the inspection.
okay. I just didn't hear the terminology was different. Administrative fee is one, then you mentioned permit fee. So
Correct.
It's one and the same.
Well, it's two parts to the one fee. And so, in other words, these are suggested amounts here, so that's for the escrow. If it exceeds that, then they have to pay more. But hopefully, that should be adequate to cover it. So in other words, if they don't, for example, the first line there, if the construction cost is $0 to $50,000, the review inspection escrow deposit will be $5,000. So if it doesn't cost $5,000, they actually get a refund of whatever.
That was my
left over.
concern with these figures here, and I think at the last meeting, Brian brought up that this is pretty well common throughout the state, these figures and that too, so.
Right.
Any further questions? Then we are ready for a motion at this point in time to accept it as the second reading, and we move forward with the ordinance.
I'll make the motion.
I'll support.
Motion's been made in support to move forward on the second reading, and
Roll call.
roll call, but along with this, don't we not have to advertise this too, and that?
Once the board approves it, then there's some publishing. We'll have to publish it, and it'll be on the effective date when we publish it.
Roll call.
The motion maker is trustee Durant.
Yes?
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee Pompo.
Yes.
Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Truscott.
Yes.
And Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. So we do have a stormwater ordinance. And this ordinance I will put in the minutes. So, you know, so the future, they'll see the ordinance in the minutes.
Along with this, has to be advertised X number of days before it officially becomes an ordinance and that. I don't know what that is anymore, time frame in that.
Yeah, it'll be posted on the website, it'll be posted in the office, it'll be advertised in the paper. There's quite a list that Clerk Rattari will be responsible for.
The clerk will take care of that portion of it, so.
Yes, me and Superintendent Page have been working on this, so we will take care of it.
Okay.
Thank
Takes
you.
care of the unfinished business. Now we're going to new business. And we have moved 10A. Now we're down to 10B, the lighting ordinance. zoning text amendment, the first reading. Who's going to be the speaker?
I think you've seen this before in draft form. This is our final. I think we got a good balance between wanting to protect the nature of the township and address issues of light pollution and also, just energy saving, but yet at the same time not making an unreasonable burden on our business district. This mostly refers to the business district, but there is a section, remember we had talked about that, about converting what had been the street lighting policy into the ordinance. And I know that you guys have already had some issues come up on that. They're basically guidelines. If you want to look on page 5, we do say Marquette Township shall ensure that the installation, operation, and maintenance of public road and subdivision lighting within the municipal boundaries of the township occur in the following manner, and then we have a list, but we also added, or as determined by the township board. So that still gives you the flexibility to not be bound by these general directions, because we all know township is very varied, and it's probably a one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't be the best way to go. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have on it. We did get input before we even really started voting on it. We reached out to electricians. We reached out to the Home Builders Association, got some comments from builders. We had a public hearing, listened to people's concerns. So we feel that and we did a lot of tweaking from what we originally had. So we think that it's the best product we could bring you.
Trustee Pompo.
Okay. I think my biggest concern is the public road lighting part of the ordinance. I think the number one priorities of a township board, as well as probably the planning commission, is the safety of the residents of the township. I have a real problem with the way that the public road lighting descriptions of where streetlights will be located. Basically, if you read into this, and then I did take a ride around the township, basically you're saying at the intersection of 2 or more public roads, which is a corner, and then at the apex of any curves with greater than 40 degrees, at hills or short sight distances. And we get down to at the end of dead-end streets upon request of the affected property owner. I have a very big problem with the fact that we are leaving it up to a property owner to decide whether we put a street light at the end of a dead-end street. I guess the biggest thing I have is if you drive on most of the roads in the township, the east-west roads probably run anywhere from 500 to 750 feet between corners. With no hills, would basically say that we're going to have one street light, and then 750 feet down the road we're going to have another street light, which means that you have a large area of unlighted roadway where pedestrians would bike or walk. And we do push for smart streets and everything else, and I think that's a big thing. If you look north-south, we actually have almost 1,000 feet in some areas where there's corner to corner. Our blocks are long in the township. I was hoping when this was looked at, the public road part was looked at under lighting, we would come up with some kind of a X amount of feet between lights. I was looking online and just through different ordinances, and I know there is some areas where you can come up with formulas and figuring what the distance between lights should be. To me, the primary purpose of a light is basically to help the motorists see if there's anybody out there while they're driving. And when you have 750 to 1,000 feet of no lights, that kind of pretty much leaves it up to the motorist headlights, which, as we all know, can be a problem, as well as finding houses or anything else in the area, or during searches and stuff, as well as safety. So have a real hard time, and I also have a hard time, again, especially the dead-end street ones. If you go from one corner to a dead-end street, again, you have 1,000 feet, 550, 750 to 1,000 feet of open roadway from a corner to a dead-end street, and if the person on the end of that dead-end street doesn't want a light, that means you have one light on the corner, and then 750 feet down, you have nothing. I have a hard time with if we're doing an ordinance, I have a hard time putting into the ordinance the fact that it's up to the people that live at that end of that dead-end street to decide whether or not they have light. That deflates any part of the safety issue of the whole purpose of the street lighting. I really believe that, I think this needs to be looked at again. I think that we need to be more specific with our public road lighting. Whatever it is, whether it's 250 feet between poles or whatever is decided, but I just think that the area we live in out here in Trowbridge obviously is a large area with large lots, which makes large blocks. And again, by eliminating all of these streetlights from just having one from one corner to the other, puts us in a very precarious way for safety as well as safety to the residents.
Well, I can kind of fill you in on how it got to be this. It's pretty much based on, we took what the policy was. A lot of these are what the current policy is. And actually, we had quite a bit of discussion, and we have Dave Wigan is a road committee member, and he is a member of the commission. The feedback that we got, at least from the public or from other people, is kind of the opposite. And maybe we're only hearing from the people who don't want a lot of lights. And I believe, I'd have to look at it as we got it, but we took the policy, the dead-end street, that was the policy now. The road committee, you've been adding lights right now. And most of the public input that we got from people were from people who are where those new lights are, and they don't like them. They don't like them, and we've had people go by. Lynn did go by one, because we have something here on light trespass, and there are some where these new lights are actually violating our own definition of light trespass, which is if a public light or a public light is so bright that it illuminates a room within the building or the residence, then that's light trespass. And we had Commissioner Durant actually kind of go and check that out. So on the weekend, this is up to the board, totally. The ordinance is something the board sets. We can revisit that, but these were things that we discussed, and I know that the road committee is also, they've been trying to do that, saying like in the middle of a block, because the Trowbridge blocks are, what is it, 600 by 100. Like on my street, well, Danny, you know where I live, if you put it right in the middle, which was what they were doing, it would end up in Badger Creek. So to put specific distances like that is difficult to do in something that's as varied as the township. We can look at adding more, and we will be glad to go back and revisit it. But I will tell you that the input that we've had from the people, and it has been in Trowbridge, where that's where the lights are being added, rather than not being enough lights, where the new lights are going in, people are not happy with them. And of course, but you know, maybe there's people who are ecstatic about it. They're not the ones who come, you know, to the public hearing or to you guys. But that's where we looked at it. We'd be glad to go back. You know, it's up to the board. But to set a specific distance, say every 200 or 300 feet, that's come up a lot of times, and it didn't seem to be workable. And that's what they've been doing now. And I know that, you know, Randy, you've been fielding some things on the new lights too. So I don't know, maybe you could speak more to it when the input that you're getting.
Trustee Pompel.
Well, again, I understand what you're saying, but you know, if the lights are too bright, then we need to get different lights. I'm sorry, I can't, and I know they're LED lights, and I know they should be shielded then to prevent that area.
We did have it shielded.
Again, the fact that because somebody doesn't want a light because they want to look at the dark sky, I understand that, but I'm sorry, when it comes to safety, I look at that more than I look at dark sky. I have a very hard time, and I don't understand why you can't set up a distance between light poles. Why can't you?
Ernie.
Trustee Surratt.
We should get our turn before he speaks again. These are minimum standards that we set up. And if you drive around like you said you have, you can't always have a light at 200 feet. It might have to be 210, it might have to be 180. The other issue that came up was, I've gotten quite a few emails, like Chair Ellen said. I've driven to those places in one cul-de-sac, the new light was put in at the end, and the old light is 20 feet away. It was ridiculous. And it's so bright, it does illuminate half the block. So we've got two things happening here. We have that was my question, is who's deciding where these lights are going? If it's going to be the road committee, there needs to be some kind of vetting as to their criteria. These are minimum standards so that a block or a corner or a cul-de-sac isn't dark. So the other part of this is, the second part is, the lights themselves are totally different from what we have out there. The lights we have now are subdued. They're kind of a gray color. They're not as bright. They're not as intense. The new ones that are being put up are these bright fluorescent blue.
LED.
Pardon?
LED.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just color-wise, they're totally different, and it's like night and day, especially seeing those two next to each other, it was ridiculous. And that was my question, is who's deciding where these are going? Just because the ordinance says it has to be at the end, if nothing else, that other light should be shut off. And the complaints we're getting is that they are too bright and too intense and too invasive. So the ordinance itself, I think, does what it's intended to do. What we have to do is figure out, because of the topography of the township, we can determine, that's why we added the part about the township board can decide. We can decide if we want to put one at 300 feet or 200 or 100. It doesn't matter if we add extra. This is just a minimum so that we have some guidelines, especially for new areas.
Trustee LaRue.
How we started this, we brought the whole thing up about lighting, and it hasn't been, we've been putting a couple lights each year, something like that. But there's so many intersections that don't have them. That's where we thought we'd start. We talked about putting every 300 feet or 350 or whatever it may be. We never addressed that. One of the reasons we didn't, because the road project came on right away, and then we turned it over to the planning to have a look at it, knowing that we would have some kind of changes after, we'd have the authority to do that. Now, we talked about realigning the intersection. There's a lot of telephone poles, they're not at the intersection. If you go right over here, HR and the old Wright Street, as you go turn by Widdock or the old State Farm, the pole is set back. On Fair Avenue in Erickson, it's a T intersection, and the pole's up the block. Now, all that's gonna cost us money to do that, and we didn't have a very good budget this year to do everything, so we thought we'd start, and we start coming up with a policy as far as how many, and that's another project for the road committee. We'll come up with some, and then we'll go over to the planning. But the Light and Power Company, they don't have any ordinance say they're gonna put it here. They go out there and they look at it and they say, okay, let's put it there, and they do it. When we realigned Warner Street, if you notice, that light on Warner and Commerce is set way back. It's not at the intersection. So them are a lot of the things we have to get done this year if possible. All depends what the budget is. But we do have to get some straight lights in the center, like Allen Street, from Ontario over to Erie Street. That's a long stretch. Lights. You can't even see the other end, so we have to do that. But I think this would be a good start. But like Danny said, we have to look for safety. So.
Clerk Rattari.
The only comment I have on there, and the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals pointed this out to me, we should add one thing to this text amendment for ordinance interpretation and appeals. So if they do have an appeal on the, on the light, like on the other ordinances, we can address that appeal like every other, ordinance has. So I just think, just add L under K and add the standard language like we have for the other ordinances, where basically you appeal it to the zoning administrator, and then the factual basis has to go to the township clerk, and just like the rest of them. So I think if we add that, that would be good for an appeal process. And that would maybe address Trustee Pomple's concerns too, and the board's concerns, where if, someone feels that they don't need a light there, they could appeal that.
Manager Gerard, you were,
Just a couple of quick points. Number one, the whole purpose of street lighting is, as Trustee Pompo says, for safety and for visibility. That's the whole purpose of street lighting. The issue of what lights we use has been taken out of our control. The law that was passed basically says incandescent lights will be replaced with either CFLs or LEDs. The Board of Light and Power has chosen LEDs as their light of choice. That's what they're putting in. And any light that gets replaced, a new light that gets installed, will be an LED, similar to what we have out here in our parking lot. We had quite a bit of discussion at the committee level with regard to this, and we have a transitioning urban area in Trowbridge. It's moving from a rural section, large lots, dark. People moved there because of that; they like it. To an infill, basically, where new construction is going on, older homes are being taken out, different people are moving in. They want the dark skies. So that's the dilemma that you have as a board, and the only way you're going to address this is to simply take a position, whether it's through the planning commission or whatever, of what your purpose for street lighting is, and then implement it. And you will have, on both sides of the coin, if you don't put lights in, you'll have angry people. If you do put lights in, you'll have angry people. It's just a matter of which ones are angry this time. And as the population changes, you will have that come up again. People will buy homes, decide they either want a light or don't want a light in front of it. The issue that Trustee Durant raised, where you have the two lights side by side, is because historically, under the policy, we have allowed, where individuals wanted a light in front of their property, we would allow them to acquire that light, and then we would put it into our inventory. So now what you have is you've got some of those lights scattered about. Then the road committee's recommendation that came to you was following the policy, so you now have a dead end not very far from where that light was installed. And those are the things that you're running into, and those are growing pains, basically. They can be corrected relatively easily. But I think that's where the board needs to be, along with the planning commission, is to establish what your reason for street lighting is and then implement it. You will have complaints both directions.
Trustee Pompo.
And I agree with Manager Rudd. No matter what you do, somebody's gonna be mad. But again, my total concern is for safety of the residents of the township. And I agree. I think the board has to decide exactly why you want streetlights. And I realize that maybe having a set number of 250 feet or something won't work in some areas, and I think that's something I didn't mean it, but it's something that had to be written in stone, and it had to be 250 feet. But you need to have some kind of a guideline rather than one at one intersection and one at another intersection. I think you need to be able to, the whole purpose of street lighting is to light the streets. And I think that's, no matter how we look at it, that's what it is. I understand the LED lighting is bright, and then there should be some kind of shielding that can prevent it from going into the people's yards or into their, so they see the brightness of their house. I think that's and this fact that we got two lights stuck in there, I think that's, again, the failure of the Board of Light and Power to get with us prior to doing this kind of thing and deciding, the way I look at it, maybe we should have a map drawn up of where if we, again, we're doing an ordinance here. I think making a general minimum statements for an ordinance doesn't work, because that's basically taking the whole teeth out of the ordinance. If you have an ordinance, this is what we want. This to me, these 5 areas of where we would put public lighting, basically you might as well not even have them, because it's nothing that we can actually say. Again, we can say at the end of a dead-end street you have to have a light, but with this ordinance it's saying, well, it's only if they ask for the light. Well, again, like Manager had said, why are we putting in streetlights? If it's just to light up somebody's driveway or, then let them put it in. But-
And this came from the policy that was in place, so I don't know where that came from.
And I understand it. And when we sat
I
down
can't answer
as
why
a
it's like
joint
that.
session, we said we don't want that policy. We want to make a policy with some teeth in it and a policy that basically says what we want with street lighting. And I think this part failed to do that, well, in my opinion. Maybe other board members don't think so, but I just don't think that this addresses safety. And that's just my opinion.
Trustee LaRue.
I've noticed that the new LED lights have short arms. The other ones have longer arms. Let's check and see if they have longer arms with a shield on it. In some cases that it butts up right against a house that's closer to the road or something, so we can take the lighting and push it out into the street a little bit more, rather than have it so tight to the property line. I don't know, but I ride around all the time and look at the lights, and I notice all the short arms. Now, I was gonna bring it up at the road committee and ask it if we could find out if they have longer arms. In some cases, a longer arm would be better. Like Commerce and Warner, all right? They're not gonna have a short arm because it's not gonna hit the road. They have to have a longer arm, move the pole. In a lot of areas where wider intersections now, you have to have something that's gonna reach out. And if you've got a house right on the corner, it's gonna have a glare of some kind, so we have to look at some shields to do that, so.
We do have shielding in here. We
Right,
do
exactly.
say that they have to be shielded. And like I said, we'll go back. If you wanted to come from the road committee or staff on what you think that minimum should be. I know the discussion that we had was they were basing it on like every 300 feet.
That's what the city does, approximately 300. But in some cases, you don't get that
You can't
either.
do it, yeah, so, but that's, I mean, and everything's up to the discretion of the board.
Trustee Durant.
In Trowbridge especially, you couldn't say you have to have it 100 feet, every 100 feet, or you probably couldn't even say in the middle of a block because of the terrain out there. It's this part of this ordinance is for us. It's for the township. In my mind, we don't have to have as specific a law in place to tell us what to do. The ordinance is geared to businesses and the streets and a little bit in subdivisions. That's the primary need for the ordinance. If we want to put lights every 5 feet, we can do that. This part of the ordinance gives the township a minimum standard saying if you've got no light at the end of a street, you need to put one there. It makes us, as a community, as a governmental body, and as a township, accountable for the health, safety, and welfare of the public, so that we're not derelict. But specifying 100, 200, 6, or whatever feet is not gonna work in this area, because you've got rocks, you've got the corner, you've got the BLP light already in a certain spot. These 5 points address the minimum of what needs to be done for us. And if we wanna change that, if we wanna add more, so what? We can do it anytime we want. The ordinance itself, I think, stands on its own merits. What we have to decide, or what we have to work on, is the type of lights, how they're gonna be angled, and again, that's why we added, as determined by the township board. We can do that anytime. Staff can do that in some cases. We're gonna have to work with these new lights because they're just too different. They're like first contact, I mean, the spotlights at the end of the road just light everything up. They do, they go right into the people's houses, and they're lighting up gardens half a lot away. They're just really different. So we're gonna have to work with the light department, or the Board of Light and Power, whoever supplies the lights to them. Either get shields or something, but this is minimum for us. Just this part, this is for us. The rest of the ordinance is, I think, what you need to be really looking at.
Clerk Rattari.
Well, my suggestion, this is a first reading, so we don't have to make any moves on it or send it back to the planning commission. But I'm fine with the ordinance. I just think that we should add to it the appeals part of it, where you can appeal to the ZBA if you don't feel if you got a problem with something. And we don't have to do it. It's a first reading, so that would be in the second reading as part of the ordinance, the final ordinance in adoption. So I can get that document, I could insert that for the next meeting. But as a first reading, it's just for our information and for the residents. And the next meeting is where we really have the big discussion on whether we go with it or not.
Trustee Pommel.
I don't mean to belabor the issue, but I have to disagree with you, Lynn. If we're having an ordinance, why would we have an ordinance that the board can change later on? If the board makes a decision what they want, put it in the ordinance. If a new board comes on, they want to change it, fine. But to say this is minimum, and then maybe 5 weeks down the road or 3 months down the road, the board just says, oh, no, hey, every 100 feet we want a light. Now we're going to change the ordinance again, redo all the lighting. I thought the whole idea was to get an ordinance so people know what it's supposed to be. Not leaving it back up to the board every time somebody comes up and says, hey, I don't want my light there now because it's shining on my house, so the board has to decide whether they're going to change it or not. Well, but you're saying if you have minimum, and then the board decides later on whether they want it 100 feet or 200 feet.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, then I misinterpreted what you said.
If we decide on Moran Street that we want to put a light somewhere, it doesn't matter if it's 100 feet or 10 feet, we can just go out and put it down. These are minimum standards so that we protect ourselves in saying that it's going to be either at the end of a block or at a cul-de-sac. We have to have lighting. We would not be changing the ordinances. That's not what I'm saying. We just go out and put the light up.
But
How can you specify 100 feet?
I don't think you were here when I said that. I didn't mean we had to be 100 feet. I'm saying we needed to have some kind of a distance so we don't have just one light on one corner and one light on the other corner. Because if you go by what you have in minimum, that's what you have. 750 feet to 1,000 feet difference between two lights by what this says. There's nothing in here that says anything has to be between that two corners. Absolutely nothing. So if somebody was to say to you, well, you can't put a light there because it doesn't say it in the ordinance.
How many times is this going to come up? This isn't something we're going to...
Again, have you driven around Trowbridge and go from block to block and some of the north, south, east, west? You went to that one house where the light was. I'm saying go to streets that have no lights. Zero. 1,000 feet, no light between them.
Sometimes there's a big boulder there. Sometimes
Well, okay, so you move it 20 feet from the boulder.
So how can you say 100 feet?
Okay.
Okay. Trustee LaRue.
Some of the factors that came into when we started on this is the cost of our budget. We looked at every school stop, at the bus stops, we looked at that, complete streets, and that's where we started. Every light that we put up is approximately $8.64. Every pole is about $400. These are approximate. I forget exactly what it was. I had it at one time. I got it somewhere. But that's what we looked at. So we wanted to get started on something like this. Some of the lights that were in front of people's house, we turned. And then we put it on, like Manager Gerard said, we put it on our bill. But every time we do that, it costs us money. And it's going to cost us, so we have to gear up for it. And what do we really want? Yes, any ordinance we can put together, and we can change it too, but we try to, do as much as we can the first time. So we have to come up with a little bit better plan maybe, and if it don't work, we can change it later on, but let's do it right. Find out how much can we afford. If we can't go and put every light 300 feet or 200 in a township right now because we're not budgeted for it. So, but we have to start somewhere.
Couple comments I'm going through here in that. The appeals process, I think, is something that we need to put in there with no question about that. So, listening to the comments from the different board members, I think a lot of it goes back to the board light and power, the height of the light, and the type of light and the shielding that. there's got to be something out there that can do it, and that. I go back to the 1990s when I was on the board, and that we had lights that would just light up the whole area, top, bottom, the whole works. And we were concerned because we had residents that were concerned with lighting up the sky and everything else around it. So our manager at the time did some research, and he was looking at a Cobra light. And we approached the Board Light Power about it. They don't know anything about it. We've never done it. We don't think we're going to do it. Well, we pushed the process, and we got it because we wanted the lights to go down. So I have a feeling that if we do some research in that, we may find some lighting that will shield some of the problems we have right now. Because right now, what I'm hearing is that it's lighting up a half a block all over and that. And we really don't want it. We want it down on the street here and not 50 to 100 feet away from it and that too. So that's one thing. The question I have, and I highlighted in here, is at the end of a dead-end street upon the request of an affected property owner. That's fine and good, but as long as that property owner owns that, if that property owner sells it, what's the next one going to do? Going to walk in and say, I want a light there now? This individual lives there 2 years and sells it, and the next person comes in and says, I don't want the light there, move it. So I have a problem with something like this here, and because we're going to have other headaches facing us in the future in that. So I just kind of looking towards the future in that, and I have some concerns with that, letting a property owner make those requests. Hearing what you're saying, I agree with that. Some of them moved out here for this reason, but I've lived in enough big cities and enough other places in that where the lights are there. You live with it in that, and if you want to have the dark sky, progress has moved from the big cities. It's moving out this way. Things are changing in that because of the residential area is getting larger, the number of people are getting more and that. And I've seen kids who's walking at night to bus stops and that, and my kids did it too. And I just didn't care for it, but at the time there was nothing we could do about it. So, and this is an ordinance, and once we pass it, to make changes to an ordinance, it is not as easy as you think. Because now you have to advertise it, you have to have public hearings and that, and you go forward. So you can make it as general as you want, but the minute you start tapping into any specific portion of this and want to make a change to it, it's a physical change to an ordinance. Now you have to move forward with all that steps going through and doing that. So as Clerk Rattari said, this is the first reading. So what's the direction that the board wants to go at this point in time?
Ernie, if I could maybe
Yeah.
offer, just because I might have misrepresented, it's not, we did set these as minimum, like Lynn said, assuming that it would be the minimum, that there would be more lights added where they were needed. It wasn't really in response to, it was because it was very hard to find that parameter, that so many feet, that language, which may be out there, and we can explore that more, but it wasn't that we didn't want to do that. We just found it hard to put into an ordinance, because like you said, once it's in the ordinance, then it's there. And if it says 300, or if it says the middle of the block, then it doesn't give you the flexibility. We were hoping that the language in the beginning of this would, and maybe, I was just going to offer as a suggestion, if you want to give us guidance, obviously I'm going to take this back to the commission. If the language was more specific, stating that this was a minimum and not to be interpreted as the only lighting in the township, but that placement of lights would be determined, and it doesn't have to be by the board. I mean, if you wanted to give us direction and say, this is something you're going to delegate to Kurt and Public Works, or would go through the manager or through the planner, maybe we can address it that way.
Clerk Rattari.
Well, to move this along, because I know there are some issues with the ordinance, the way it's written, I'll make a motion to resend this back to the Planning Commission, and then when you can get some things ironed out, it can come back to us again as a first reading, and then go back to that process.
Could I ask for a little direction, though. Do you want us to come back with a specific distance? Do you want us to come back with language that clarifies more that these are the minimum and that there will be additional lights as determined by? Or do you want to, we weren't going to meet, we had actually canceled our meeting of next week because we didn't have anything on the agenda. So this would probably be the first meeting in July, or?
What I would suggest is, any board member with comments and suggestions, that you get them to the clerk, and the clerk will then forward them on to the planning commission, so they have that, so.
Okay.
Well, I have a motion on the floor, sending it back to the planning commission with input from the board.
Second. Motion on the floor and second. Any further comments from board members? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
As I said before, if you have any concerns or questions or possible direction for the planning commission, please get it to the clerk, and the clerk will then summarize them and get them to the planning commission.
Just so I'm not the middle person on this, I'll just, to make sure it goes directly to Ellen, I'll send you her email to make sure. I don't want to get caught. I'll make sure I'm not in the middle of this one, so we'll make sure the comments get directly to you.
All I want to do is flow through it, to you and all. Okay. The next item is consider the updated Freedom of Information policy, and that'll we'll refer back to the clerk.
Okay, a little background on this. The Michigan legislators changed the law on the Freedom of Information Act, and they passed some adjustments to the act, and that will be active as of July 1 of this year. So basically, when I found that out, I resent all our FOIA forms to our township attorney, and what you have before you is the amended version of what we need to have to be compliant with the new law. So, and if we did not have these in place by July 1, we could not charge for any FOIA requests that came in. So it's imperative that we have this in place.
Do we have to make a formal motion to accept this as a new procedure and guidelines?
Yes. And also, I do have one question for the board, and this is totally up to the board. There's one part in this FOIA request that the township board has an authority for charges based on labor and time frames. I have in there 15-minute increments. So like if you came in with a FOIA request and it took staff less than 15 minutes to get it done, there'd be no charge for the labor. But if it was 8 hours, it'd be a little differently. And what I was explained to, that's what the township board has control over, is what, are they fine at 15-minute increments? Do they want an hour? Do they want 2 hours? And that's what I'm asking you. I have 15 minutes in there, but that part of the FOIA request is totally up to the board. So if anyone would like to change that, let me know. Otherwise, it'll stand at 15-minute increments that we'll charge labor for.
Comment from board members.
That's reasonable.
Trustee Durant.
I'm just wondering, two things. Excuse me. First of all, this is a lot longer than the original one, so I'm wondering what's different. And secondly, you probably can't answer, I mean, how much the 15-minute increment matters, because tomorrow you could get 500 FOIAs and you may not get one for 6 months, so there's probably no
Well, I'll tell you where
base it on.
I'll tell you where it matters, Lynn, is like some requests that come in, and you don't have to create a document for a FOIA request. Usually we have a copy of something. So if it's just a matter of myself or one of our staff members just to go and copy it and give it to the person, that would be, that's less than a couple of minutes. But if it's something, and we've had these before, where it took staff hours to research some of the documents that we were trying to find. I mean, now we can recover some of those costs, which in the past, it was harder to recover those costs. That's what I believe this amended act came from. It was for more responsibility to the requester to be on task for what they wanted. So it wasn't just a big general statement. I wanted all of this. Well, you got to be more specific. But the new forms for me, if you follow the forms the way they are, it's really cut and dried in how you do it, you know, as far as charges and everything else. And it's very specific, laid out. And of course, an attorney wrote them. So if we ever got challenged in court on a FOIA request, and these forms help our defense on any of those, you know, challenges, the way that they're written now.
You decided the 15 minutes and you're comfortable with that?
I did not decide it. The attorney, and that's what he told me, that was totally up to the township board, the time increments of what we would be willing to charge for labor. But I told him I was comfortable with 15 minutes, but I will discuss that with the township board and see if they felt they wanted a half hour or an hour. I think my recommendation is 15 minutes is fine.
Trustee.
In our last MTA there, I was talking to some of the township about FOIA, and they'd be very comfortable with it. Some goes right to if you ask for a copy, you could charge for that copy. And in some of the townships who's affected by this largely, it costs them a lot of money. Now, I went someplace closer than downstate. Republic years ago had a lot of problems with that, and it cost them a lot of money. So, if you know, somebody wants to talk to Gary up there, he'd be glad to inform you exactly how much it is. But the 15 minutes, I think, is very comfortable with. Like I say, a lot of people, they come in for a copy of something, they charge for it. But if you're willing to do 15, that's fine.
And basically, the labor charges is minimum wage, basically. So that's what you're talking about. You're not talking about a big absorbent wage. It's basically minimum wage, what we'd be charging for labor.
Any further questions from the board? Okay. Next item is the action.
I'll make a motion, we adopt the new FOIA procedures and guidelines for Marquette Township.
A motion to adopt the new FOIA procedures and guidelines, and it has been supported. Any further questions by board members?
Roll call vote.
Okay, we have a roll call vote.
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee Pompo?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Durant?
Yes.
Trustee Trescott?
Yes.
And Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
That motion carries. These new FOIA procedures and guidelines will be effective July 1, and I'll make sure they get on the website ASAP.
Okay, good. Okay, the next item on it is the manager's report.
You do have a printed report in front of you. A couple of items I just wanted to hit, though, for the folks who might see it on YouTube or on the broadcast. The new traffic signal at Brickyard Road and US 41 has been installed. It's been in the flash mode now for just about a week. It goes into full operation tomorrow. So, you know, it will be fully operational. The road commission has established mobile signs, flashing signs, about a quarter of a mile on each side to alert motorists to the sign. We are certainly encouraging patrons of Lowe's and the satellite stores around Lowe's to use the traffic light, to go to the traffic light to exit, particularly eastbound traffic. Westbound traffic, it's not a big deal, but eastbound traffic, we're encouraging them to avoid the Smith Drive entrance, turning eastbound, turning left out of there, go to the traffic light. You'll be able to safely turn left there and not be in a situation where it's difficult to observe traffic at that corner. So certainly that's our recommendation. The MGT cost studies, excuse me, when I put this together, we were expecting them to be available to you for this meeting. There were a couple of changes that were made with the last review that was done by one of the department heads that modified several of the proposals, so it will be available to you prior to your next meeting. So you have a chance to look through it, ask any questions you may have of Gordon Stryker or of Jim Olson prior to the board meeting. So you will have that coming to you. They did provide the draft to us within the 90 days as they as the contract provided for both the cost study and the allocation study. Those were sent out to department heads. They were sent out for review, and we've been going back and forth basically with responses and questions. Let's see, corridor committee, straightforward. The township-sponsored events, board members have any questions about those? Most of those were events that are scheduled, events that are coming up. The one private event may be a concern for the township. It is a private event that's going on Forestville Road. We have assurances that they will not be having traffic on Forestville Road. They'll be parking cars in the city of Marquette and shuttling patrons. There's a limit of 500 tickets being sold for that event, but there may be some impacts on the township with regard to either law enforcement or fire as a result of that. So I just wanted to bring you aware of that. The only other comment that I want to make, Trustee Johnson, you mentioned about the resident, excuse me, that is having an issue with improper disposal of items on their property. Should that occur to any township property owner, notify the sheriff's department. That is illegal. Chances are one of your neighbors saw the vehicle that did that, or the people that did that you can get a description of, and we will pursue that.
Okay, I will contact.
That's all that I had, unless there are any questions from board members.
Trustee Duran.
You've got 4 items that you were working on this year for your goals.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you had an update on Mason's Bluff and then the equipment and maintenance program?
Where we are with Mason's Bluff is it's right now we are in negotiations with the Catholic Credit Union. They are looking to try and get this going. They are going to be the financer and the contractor. They are trying to secure their subcontractors to move forward with that. Superintendent Page has been working with them in terms of the final agreements that we need to have in place to do the pumping station and to get those other items in place that need to go on. And Attorney Zappa is finalizing the last deeds that need to be finalized, so that is in process. The equipment maintenance, we are in the process of working one of those up to get it. Part of the cost allocation study was we asked them to take a look at that and to give us some recommendations on how to set it up for a small fleet like we have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Pompel.
A month ago, I commented on the access road.
Yes.
And I know that the reasoning we couldn't fix it was because of road restrictions. They've been out for a month now. That the road is getting to the point where it is actually almost impossible to drive on without destroying your vehicle. I'm just wondering where we're standing on that.
We have asked the road commission for the use of one of their graders, and we believe, we've gone over and looked at it, we believe there is enough material there on the road that we don't need to acquire additional material. It just needs to be graded and pulled back off the side of the road, so we're in the process of doing that ourselves.
The question I have, if no one else has, is on, we're looking at the corridor minutes from Marquette Township. They're talking about the Brickyard Road traffic signal, and the comment that, like Smith Construction is not in agreement with changing the driveway because they'd have to drive their trucks through the Lowell parking lot. And to me, that does not sound like a good thing to do, bringing big trucks right through the parking lot to get to the stoplight. That too is
Yeah, and it's not, and that is a bone of contention. As you'll recall, basically, the Michigan Department of Transportation had a caveat, basically, for putting a light up there, and that was to have what's euphemistically called a pork chop, basically put in that driveway, the Smith driveway, to restrict left turns. So you would have to turn right. That created an issue for Smith Paving because they felt that, you know, they would be at disadvantage for that. So what they were trying to do is negotiate with Lowe's and with Shops of Marquette to allow their trucks to move along the frontage, I'll call it a frontage road, that front drive through the parking lot, basically to get to the light to make the left-hand turn. They could not come to that agreement, and obviously, you know, they were not interested in having those heavy trucks mix in with their with their commercial traffic, their visitors, basically, basic vehicle traffic. So that did not come to fruition. The MDOT backed off of that requirement, put the light in anyway, so Smith Paving will basically have the same access they've always had at that Smith Drive access. We're hoping that by directing the traditional vehicle traffic to the traffic light internally within that parking lot, that'll alleviate some of that issue.
So it sounds like at that light, you can make either left or right turns. At the
Correct.
time.
Yeah, it's correct. It'll be very similar to Commerce here, other than you'll be able to make a left. There will not be a separate left turn light, basically, like there is at Walmart and Target, but you will be able to make a left-hand turn at that intersection. Say again?
They include a lane for that?
It's the same configuration basically as out here, but a little bit wider. It's not a separate lane. It's it's like Grove Street. It's very similar to Grove Street.
Any other questions? Trustee Pompano.
One more, I failed to mention. I don't know if it was us that cut the median, but I'm very impressed with the fact that the median is. the
Actually, it
grass is
was
cut.
Road Commission this time. We've cut it twice now. So for the Road Commission cut one early, and for those of you that have lawns, you know what's been happening with your lawn. It's like every other day it's ready to be cut. We've cut the median, our staff has cut the median twice. The one that was done today was the Road Commission.
Further questions? Going on now, public comment. Okay. Additional comments from board members?
Apologize for the coughing.
Trustee LaRue.
Him too. Me too.
Just want to remind people, this coming Saturday, Lions Field 3-on-3 boot street hockey from 9 to 4. So, and also on 27th of June, we got the car show, Catch a Vision car show, antique car show at Applebee's. And then they're going to have a tour going out by the island and back. Another thing happening in this coming summer is August 1st. The Catch a Vision Community Days, August 1st. So mark your calendars.
Last call. I don't see anyone, so additional comments from board members are done. Well, I have one more thing.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Lots of
We have a
support.
motion and 2 supports. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.